for me, a mantra in my sort of day-to-day climate work is go for the gigatons. And while
Mm.
as a homeowner, a single homeowner, you can't do that, you can look at your biggest spend. So what are the most gigantic energy sinks in your home? Two-thirds of home energy use is from heating and hot water.
Welcome to Home Green Homes podcast. I am Izumi Tanaka. I am a green realtor, change agent with Latitude Regenerative Real Estate, brokered by EXP. On my podcast, I talk to people who share information, experience, and/or knowledge about designing, building, living, or even dreaming of homes that are not only sustainable and resilient, but also regenerative and forward-facing, so that people and the planet can both thrive. Today's guest is Trent Wolbe. He is currently a VP of marketing for a startup called Harvest, but I invited him to be my guest today because of his fascinating history and passionate dedication to help this environmental crisis we face. He recently joined me as a co-chair of the Green Home Committees at USGBC-LA and dove right into actions, which I am so grateful for. He's going to share how watching Ninja Turtle in his youth led him to be who he is today, and how he and his partner built a sustainable ADU in Los Angeles. Let's dive in, Trent. So tell me about your background. And I get that you're such an enthusiast in, protecting our environment or making it better and all that. But what do you think got you there to start with? Like, what was the catalyst? Or, as a child, you had some experience, and I'm always curious to know.
Yeah, well, thank you, Izumi, for having me here. It's been a pleasure to get to know you through the Green Homes Committee at USGBC LA. So very clearly, I remember when the first time I started caring about this stuff. I was a huge Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fan growing up as a kid. Like all of my pets were named Donatello, Splinter, Leonardo. And I was dressing up as them every year for Halloween. And so there was, in the context of all of these Ninja Turtles cartoons, there was like a PSA at the end, animated PSA.
Uh-huh.
And the story of the Ninja Turtles is that they were created when they were living in the sewer and they climbed through some toxic sludge that had been thrown into the sewer. And there was some line in this PSA, I have to find it at some point, that said, like, don't be like that person who threw the toxic sludge down the drain, protect the earth, like, be with us. And so that's really the first time that I ever thought about it. And so like, never underestimate the power of children's media to influence people's thinking. So that was the very, very first time I ever remember
Oh
caring
my
and being
God.
and recognizing that there was something to be paid attention to. Yeah.
Wow. I have never had anybody tell me about the Ninja Turtle thing. That's
It's weird. I
great.
mean, like it, yeah,
That's
I
great.
guess I grew up um with the surroundings, I grew up in Dallas and there was
Mm,
no environmental messaging to be, you know, uh found in my surroundings naturally. So that must have been how it came through.
yeah, that's amazing. So that's great. I love hearing that story. So with that inspiration or with whatever the impact that Ninja Turtle PSA had on you, um, tell us some of the things that some of the incredible things that you have been doing, since you obviously grew up and became a member of a society, and you have been doing some amazing things.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I think all throughout sort of high school, and then moving into college, I just started paying attention to solar panels for some reason. They always had a special place in my heart. The way they looked, the way they reflected light was always really crazy to me. And the fact that they pulled this ethereal force out of the air and turned it into things that could power your computer or your remote control car or whatever was always just really crazy to me. And I
Mm.
did, as I was growing up, have the chance to go out and experience nature and go camping, and be more at home with nature. I think that sort of more awakened my senses to really learning how I was interacting with the environment around me. It was always sort of a personal project for a long time, and I became hyper aware of the impacts of climate change and how that might sort of feed into the way that I might conduct myself in the future, the way I and my descendants might find ourselves in the future. I was always very into technology, and ended up out of, well, during college, producing podcasts for a website called Engadget, and then a website, and it was always about looking into the future and reviewing technology products, music products, and I always knew that I wanted to sort of live in the future. There became
Mm.
a point where I started to realize that maybe the future wasn't going to be as cool as we thought it was going to be. And all of this technology didn't always necessarily have a
Mm.
wonderful end at the end of the story. So when I was writing at The Verge, I began to start to edge into things that were more sustainability focused where I could. And I also, during that time period around 2007, I was very much a radio person at that point. I had a radio show on WFMU in Jersey City, New Jersey, and I had a very lenient program director and general manager who encouraged experimentation with radio. And at that point, I was also studying to get my entry level PV installation certificate at a program offered at Brooklyn College in Brooklyn, New York. And I just had a crazy idea one day to build a portable solar powered broadcast rig. So I had some
Oh,
friends who were in the
wow.
sustainability space around that time period. And I brought this idea to some friends of mine who worked at an organization called Solar One in New York. Solar One was a very early pioneer of sort of off grid in the city. And they
Mm.
have a really amazing events and outdoor space on the East River in New York. And so I came to my friend Chris Neidl, who is another amazing leader in carbon removals now, and also really helped to build residential PV in New York City. I said, Chris, like, what if we could do a really cool party that could promote solar and I could power my portable DJ rig and we could broadcast live from spaces around New York City and environs to showcase the power of solar and of sustainability to do something really cool with it. I have the idea, but I have no idea how to do it, you know. And he helped me put together the actual portable rig that could do it, and then also promote the events. So that was a really my first like foot in the ground, stake in the ground, in terms of making this personal passion of mine into something more real.
Mm.
And then just followed the path, moved to Los Angeles in 2010, um, and at that point became really interested in off-grid homes. At that point, I think the dystopian nightmare of the future, the potential terrible future was bubbling up in a lot of people's brains, perhaps mine more so than others. And I had um, actually been skiing in Taos, New Mexico with
Oh,
my
wow.
sister and my family in around 2010.
Mm.
And we were just driving through Taos on Highway 64, and I looked over to like the side of the road, and there were all of these crazy structures sort of rising out of the ground off of Highway 64, and they were glinting, reflecting solar panels and southern facing windows. And we literally pulled over. So like, what the hell is that? and that was the first time I ever saw an Earthship. And so the Earthship biotecture um, property is out there, hundreds of acres in the mesa outside of Taos, New Mexico. And it sort of clicked with me instantly that I really wanted to learn a lot more about these structures.
Mm.
And at that point in time, I can go on and on about Earthships, but
Yeah.
they they're passive off-grid homes made primarily out of rammed earth tires, all southern facing, so that they collect the solar gain in the daytime and store
Mm.
it in the greenhouse that's strapped on to the south side of the house, so that the flagstone in the garden and the garden itself absorbs a lot of the heat during the day, and then using passive convection and thermal gain that's been received during the day can heat
Mm.
the rest of the house during the night if need be. But really, you're staying a constant sort of 70 degrees inside the house at
Mm.
all time. So it was all these things. I was there at the right place and time. I was sort of like a freelancer at that point. I had some time on my hands. Decided to go and do the Earthship Biotecture Academy for 2 months, live on the mesa, learn how to build these structures. And uh, that was the beginning of a journey. That shortly thereafter, I came back to LA, and uh, my partner surprised me with this great news that she was pregnant. And
Oh
so
my God.
we my plan had been to come back from New Mexico and then find a way to like move back there immediately or build my own Earthship in LA. But that plan got shelved for a few years
Mm.
until you know, I had to make myself financially stable after having a kid, so that took a long time. But then, yeah, I've been going on for a long time, so I can kind of
Wow.
pause there.
It's
But yeah, there's
indeed, it feels like it's somewhat, I mean, all the circumstances are completely different, but somewhat similar to how I've kind of navigated my life in terms of like, following what showed up and, you know, like what my passion was at that time. And it's so fascinating. So I want to get back to your ADU story because that's something that I was originally interested in hearing from you. But you have so many great stories like embedded in the story. So um, just to kind of touch on the Earthship a little bit more. So you say you built one
when I
yourself?
was living in New Mexico in 2012, I helped build
Mm-hmm.
three or four, five of them.
Mm-hmm.
But after all of that, I was always wondering how to get in an Earthship later.
Mm-hmm.
And in the pandemic, I, with a couple of friends of mine, started sort of a side hustle.
Ah.
And the idea was to do off-grid sustainable homes
Mm-hmm.
that we could use as education services. So
Right, right,
purchasing and then having these properties serve as off-grid sustainable
right.
vacation places, but also I think more importantly as places to serve as a nexus for people
Yeah.
to really learn how a sustainable future
Right,
could
right.
be. So
Mm-hmm.
we bought a pre-existing Earthship, and then
Mm-hmm.
that became a place for us to convene as people and friends, but more importantly, to be able to tell stories about a more beautiful future than the one that's depicted in
Mm-hmm.
dystopian sci-fi novels.
Dystopian sci-fi movie. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So you still have that Earthship in New Mexico?
Yes,
Okay, so
me
you're still
along
part
with
of.
my two partners who are very
Mm-hmm.
close friends of mine.
Mm-hmm.
We have it, and we are there between the three of us 3 or 4 months a year, and the rest of the
Mm.
time we rent it out for short-term
Mm-hmm.
rentals.
I see. I see. So when you are there, do you actually host any kind of a workshop or something that like you mentioned for people
Yeah,
who
so
come to learn about it?
yeah, the and last summer, my partner Izzy, who is a co-owner with me,
Mm-hmm.
and I hosted an event called Climate Hang, which was about
Mm-hmm.
the intersection of ethnobotanical medicine and climate change. So that was hosted like within the area of the Earthship.
Mm-hmm.
So we've also been able to host a lot of people in the sustainability space at
Mm-hmm.
the Earthship. So and then I
Mm-hmm.
think the biggest impact that we've been able to have there is that Dwell Magazine wrote an article about
Yes, I saw
the
that.
Earthship,
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
which was um, yes, great publicity for the concept of Earthships, but also I think more importantly for us, we had this iconic, the architecture magazine discussing this off-grid home
Mm-hmm.
in a way that was really complimentary and
Yeah,
understanding of the way that people can live in concert with nature and sort of also be modern people in society, for lack of a better
right,
term.
right.
So we were, but I think uh, really it served to show again this off-grid sustainable future doesn't have to want for good design, for
Mm-hmm.
value, for
Mm-hmm.
being in a beautiful setting. So all of that stuff came together in an article like that, and we're hoping to do more of that as time goes on.
That's beautiful. And I know about Earthship, but I don't know how it was developed. So is there a community that's all Earthship, and is it like organized as a homeowners community, like private community, or how does that work?
So it's a very long and complicated and political story that is perhaps
Oh,
at its
okay.
most complicated right now because there's a lot of controversy around the founder.
Mm,
His name is Michael Reynolds. He is a obviously genius
mm,
businessman and
mm-hmm,
architect.
mm-hmm.
And you could imagine all of the problems that come along with being a genius. Anything
Yeah.
they accompany him. So I'm not going to go into that in detail here. Anybody who
Okay.
wants to Google it, they
Probably.
can. But
Yes.
it's ostensibly a community of around 75 Earthships that
Mm-hmm.
have primarily been built by Earthship Biotecture, which is Michael Reynolds' company. There are
Mm-hmm.
also a lot of independent contractors who've gone up there and built themselves, as
I
well as
see.
some self builders.
I see.
So it runs the gamut, but it is certainly like a sight to behold. I recommend
Mm-hmm.
anybody who's in northern New Mexico, even if you aren't traveling there when you can, in an
Yeah.
EV preferably,
Yeah.
and finding yourself there because it's an incredible place to begin with, and to
Yeah.
see how homes can live in harmony with nature, more or
Mm.
less. It's not
Yeah.
perfect by any means, but it's quite inspirational. So
Yeah.
it's essentially a many hundreds of acres HOA that is administered by uh, ostensibly a board. I won't go into this politics here again, but it's a community of Earthships there.
Yes.
There are also hundreds of Earthships in New Mexico, and there's one on every continent, and there are thousands around the world with varying
Mm.
levels of officialness in terms of were they built by the company or were they just sort of owner developed from the ground up?
Interesting. That's probably worth a whole episode of my podcast. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, let's talk about your home in LA. So, you have come moved to LA and bought a property in Los Angeles close to downtown LA, and now you have a ADU. And um, tell me about that story. I know that you made it sustainable, quote unquote sustainable with it's net zero, is you said? Is it net zero?
So we to answer that question directly, our energy bills are close to zero. We pay the
Mm,
$22 interconnection
mm-hmm.
fee. Sometimes it's negative in the summer. Sometimes it's well, usually like any HVAC situation, the energy load is higher in the winter and in the summer, um, but it tends to go negative during the shoulder seasons.
Okay,
So
so
in the
let me
spring and
back
fall.
up. Let me back up. So, tell me about your property. Is it it's a single family home, I'm assuming. How big
Yeah.
is it?
So to back up just a little bit for context, we
Sure.
purchased a 10 1923 Craftsman home in Highland Park, Los Angeles. It's on 0.11 acres. About a fourth of that was home, and three-quarters of it were raw land,
Mm,
which is typical for LA. You have about 25% of the lot built on by a single family home.
mm-hmm,
The building, and so that building is right there. We used to live in it, and
mm-hmm,
that building that I'm standing in right now is an ADU. It is about 1,100 square feet without the garage. I'm currently standing in the garage, which is an unpermitted office. It's supposed to be able to park a car in here, but I don't mind telling the world that I put carpet in and now I use it as my office. So
mm-hmm,
basically, if you add the garage into the equation, it's about 1,300 square feet.
mm-hmm,
So it's very uh, it's big for an ADU. It was the first ADU created under the new expanded ADU laws that came into
mm-hmm,
effect around 2018.
mm-hmm,
We worked with the city of LA, the mayor's innovation office, with Bloomberg Smart Cities initiative, and with our council district CD1. Now embattled district member Gil Cedillo was my representative at that point. And I don't know if he still is currently, actually, but so we worked very closely with all these partners and very closely with the architecture firm called LA Moss to
mm-hmm,
build a home from the ground up at a reasonable price. The original budget was $275,000. We went far over that, but still was reasonable at around $325,000. And so the idea was to create an ADU with sort of off the shelf parts, so nothing super specialized,
mm-hmm,
nothing super expensive, that could be modeled on to build other ADUs of this size and shape in LA to
mm-hmm,
hopefully one day alleviate the housing crisis and to make it
mm,
easier to add building stock where we know we need to.
mm-hmm.
Is that happening? Again, political situation I will not comment on. I
Right.
think everybody knows that ADUs are a part of the housing solution, that we have too much, not enough density at a place like LA to make it affordable for vast swaths of people. That's not a secret. Um, so the home itself, to answer your question, when we were building it, there were all these trade-offs of like,
Mm,
what do you mean sustainable? What are you prioritizing? How much do you want to pay for that? And so like everything else, like I'm sure you're familiar with Izumi, like what are you optimizing for? You're optimizing for materials. Are you optimizing for your energy load? You're optimizing for the short, medium, or long term. How much money do you have to spend? How much are you willing to go over budget? What are you taking into account that's passive versus active
mm,
heating and cooling? So
mhm,
the things that we ended up prioritizing for were off the shelf parts. So um, we in general, and I also used to run sustainability for global events at Google. So that was a massive thing where you're building and generally throwing away massive
mhm. Yeah.
sets for very little time spent inside. And you can spend a lot of money on sustainable materials, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you could build your house out of um, recycled ocean plastic if you want. But it's going to be a couple of things. A, it's probably going to be flown in from China,
Yeah.
or Italy or somewhere where
Yeah.
they mass manufactured that stuff at the time. And so for me, I never forget transportation costs because
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't make any sense to have 100% recycled materials if they are assembled in China and flown
And
over
came all
here.
the way. Yes.
It just doesn't make any sense. So I'd rather
Mm-hmm.
use the bad stuff from here,
Mm,
plastics made in the US, virgin materials, than have them be fake and
right.
cost twice as much and shipped over from
Right.
China or Italy. So that's all to say, I didn't prioritize these expensive sustainable materials. What I did was I optimized for things that are already doing well. So FSC certified wood is
Mm-hmm.
not perfect, but it is something that they have at Home Depot, which is where
Mm-hmm.
we got a lot of our materials. And it's something that is generally accepted to be a standard that we can believe in.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked my favorite materials people at Google about all that stuff, and they said, look, you can search all you want, just look for FSC certified, and that's going to be a way that you can be relatively sure that you're doing a good thing that will balance out in terms of material costs. What we really did was,
Just
yeah.
a second. So FSC, just so that people who may not know, so are you talking about the kitchen cabinetries and bathroom cabinetries or flooring, or the wood materials for FSC? It's a Forest Stewardship Council certification, right?
So the structural members
Oh,
and
structural members too.
the OSB that you
Mm-hmm.
see
Mm-hmm.
on the surfaces is uh, where possible all FSC certified. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so there is a lot of material that went into the walls around me that
Mm-hmm.
are FSC certified. And if I show
Mm-hmm.
you, I give you a tour of the inside, you'll see there's a lot of exposed wood, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
exposed beams, and that's for the most part FSC.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that we prioritized. Um, but like we're in Los Angeles, we have the strictest building codes,
Right.
definitely in the US, if not the
Mm-hmm.
world.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to kid anybody about my FSC wood when they had to come in and pour 50 tons of concrete and rebar underneath me to make code.
Mm.
So for me, like you can't build sustainably in Los Angeles. It's impossible to build with sustainable materials. And I want that to be very clear. Like as much as we tried, I did not prioritize the carbon sink of the materials themselves
Mm-hmm.
because we had to hose. I can show you a video of the guy hosing concrete over rebar here because that's what was available then.
Mm.
I think now, if we were building it in 2024, I would have them look more seriously into things like carb fix and hempcrete and aircrete that would
Mm-hmm.
be able to provide some sort of structural integrity while still being a carbon less carbon intensive,
Oh,
but
yeah. Mm-hmm.
still really expensive, still not available at quantity in LA.
Right.
So it's all of this continuous conversation like, well, do you want to help alleviate the housing crisis and make an
Mm.
affordable thing, or do you make something? So that's all to say, like the materiality of the house, we tried quite a bit, but oftentimes it wasn't the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, right? So like we this is like my one of my favorite terms with this thing. It's like, well, really, what are we optimizing for then? And only a certain amount of the carbon is going to be put into the built environment. Really, what we're optimizing for is energy use, right? Because that's what's
Mm.
going to
Mm-hmm.
far outlast the carbon sink that went into the materials themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So we just made the envelope just as tight as humanly possible, with really high insulation levels in the attic and in the walls. I'm standing in a garage right now, which is still a little bit chilly. I won't lie in the winter because we have really great passive thermal cooling. We have nine
Mm.
giant concrete caissons that go 10 feet into the ground. They're 3 feet wide. They literally suck the air, the cool ground temperature out of the ground 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. In the summer, we have an incredibly nice passively cooled ground floor.
Mm.
And so that's what I'm optimizing for in the house. I'm optimizing for really hot and increasingly hot summers.
Yeah.
Um, I did not optimize as much for winters because it's just less of a heating load problem for us. The summers are worse in LA.
Yeah.
If we were in San Francisco or anywhere north of that latitude, of course it would be different. But
Right.
because I knew we were getting hotter, I optimized for cooling. So the summers here are
Yeah.
extremely pleasant. The winters here are a little chilly.
Yeah, I see. Wow, what a story. And so let me get back to asking you the question about net zero part. So you have, and oh, by the way, how long did it take you to accomplish what you were able to accomplish in the end? I mean, and I'm sure it's still evolving.
Yeah, so the first emails that I had with LA Moss were in 2015
Mm-hmm.
or maybe early 2016, and the home was finally complete in 2019.
Oh,
So 3 or 4
wow.
years, it was already a long time. And
Yeah.
yeah, so it was definitely a long time. And there are other features I can talk about too, but we haven't really gotten there yet.
Okay,
Yeah.
tell me some other features then.
So we of course have like PV and battery for our
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
electrochemical loads, and we have no gas in the house. So we have electric stove. It's resistive. Unfortunately, we didn't have the budget to go induction at that point, which
Mm-hmm.
I'm now kicking myself on, but room for upgrading. We have heat pump water heater, which I'm incredibly pleased with. It's a Rheem Proterra that you and I have talked about quite a bit, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm very pleased with that. So pleased that we bought one for the Earthship in New Mexico as well. Um, the solar and battery, we're in the Tesla ecosystem, so we're able to live monitor all the time, and I can always see what my current current day's spend is, and we're most days we're 90+% powered by PV plus grid, and then
Mm-hmm.
so we're feeling really confident that that was a good decision. We also have native landscaping all through the yards provided by Terremoto and Theodore Payne Foundation. So really happy with the passive
Mm.
rainwater collection that we're able to do there, and also food production. We have currently lettuce, peaches, cherries, pomegranates growing
Oh,
out there. So trying to give
nice.
our daughter a sense of where food
Yeah.
actually comes from. It's been not,
Yeah.
certainly not at the majority of our calories by any stretch of the imagination. And then we also have 2,000 gallons of rainwater collection, which was mandated by the city's lid
Mm-hmm.
requirements,
Mm-hmm.
which I have other thoughts on. I think that the way
Mm-hmm.
that they're implementing them is pretty terrible, but we're really trying to proactively use that water
Mm-hmm.
to feed our garden.
Right.
And then we have gray water laundry to landscape provided by Gray Water Corps on both houses. So we're working towards water independence. That's going to be a much longer process because it's illegal
Yeah.
to drink to collect potable water and drink it indoors in LA. It's obviously um, useful for outside landscaping and irrigating, but not legal inside. So that's one of my passion points as
Yeah.
well.
That's so this is so fascinating. Now, if somebody was thinking about doing what you did, Trent, what would you tell them? Like, what kind of advice would you give them at this point? Now that it's kind of although you may probably have other things that you can add to or change or something for your existing home, but it's basically you're basically complete. Like you are living in it and enjoying the benefit. What would be the things that you would tell somebody who's thinking about building a home like that in LA?
Yeah, a great question. And it's for me a mantra in my sort of day-to-day climate work is go for the gigatons. And while
Mm,
as a homeowner, a single homeowner, you can't do that, you can look at your biggest spends. So what are the most gigantic energy sinks in your home? Two-thirds of home energy use is from heating and hot water.
yeah.
So you can do nothing else but get a uh, heat pump, water heater, and hopefully a battery. You know, the company that I work for now is called Harvest. It's a smart thermal battery, a novel technology that does load shifting and
Mm,
energy storage in a hot water tank that is incredible. We're not quite available in LA yet, but
mm,
if I were to do it today, I would heat pump water heater by far number one, two, and three. And
mm-hmm,
also, of course, heat pump HVAC is really important. We have heat pump water heater and one reversible AC mini split in one of our rooms.
mm-hmm.
So do that first, and then make your home as uh, envelope heavy as possible. So spend extra money on the attic and insulate your freaking attic. Like,
Yeah.
just do it. Like, spend
Yeah.
all the money on insulating your attic. You're going to save it all and then some on energy bills later.
Mm-hmm,
So do those things first. That's two-thirds of your energy use. And
mm-hmm,
always, always, always solar and battery. People complain about NEM 3 or whatever it is now, but like you need a battery. Just bite the bullet and get that done first.
Yep.
And then that's the easiest thing to do. And then focus on water. What can you
Mm,
do to reduce your intake? So everything is about reducing. For me, like if
mm-hmm,
you're building something new, just build for reduction of your needs for water and energy for the long run.
mm-hmm.
You can focus on that all day long and like don't get distracted by shiny things
Yes.
because people can talk about like like no VOC paint and like recycled blue jean wall insulation, which we have, and it's amazing. And I love those innovations, but those are way down the list. Like you
Mm-hmm.
have to make sure that you're saving your long-term energy and water use is by far the most important thing. And if you then do that, every decision becomes clear, right? So
Mm.
if you need help selecting a heat pump water heater, like reach out to a friend or reach out to Quick Carbon. Quick Carbon is an amazing resource. So I would actually point people to resources like quickcarbon.com,
Yeah.
which and I know are a great resource to plan home electrification in a way that's really efficient and
Yes.
really understand your utility rates, time of use
Mm-hmm.
for both EV drivers and non-EV drivers is important to understand.
Yeah.
So I would just get knowledgeable there and just refuse gas hookups. Like, don't put gas in your house. It's not illegal here in LA yet, but like, no gas.
Soon, soon, very
Yeah,
soon.
soon.
Now,
So
do you,
focus on the big things, I would say.
yeah, so do you have any tip for navigating like the permitting process or dealing with the municipalities?
I would not build a new house in LA. Just find something out there that already exists. So to save
Yeah,
on construction,
yeah,
really the way to the way to be more sustainable is to use what's
yeah,
already there.
yeah, I
So go
agree.
in and think about the way that a bird builds its nest, I think
Yeah,
is a good analogy that I heard one time.
I
Um,
like that.
don't try to go in, like a bird will build its nest like in a little cranny in the corner of a highway. It'll build its nest in a Target sign in a parking
Yeah,
lot. It'll build its
yeah,
nest in a tree, of course. So if you have to go gut a house, gut it and retrofit it with a lot of insulation, cut the gas line, and build in PV to it. So I would never build a house from scratch in LA, LA County. I might do it starting in San Bernardino County or Ventura County, but
yeah.
it's just not like I'm just a little bit burned, especially on the sustainability side. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the incentives aren't there yet, and unfortunately, like from my perspective, the policy is not there to accelerate home building. Maybe Karen Bass and others will change that, but right now it's too hard. Like use what's already there,
Yeah.
and make it better. I think that's the way that we all have to think about things.
I am 100% with you. I'm so grateful, Trent. It was so great to listen to your stories. It's really fascinating. Thank you so much.
Of
Is
course,
there,
thank you so much for having me.
oh, you're welcome. Is there anything that, if anybody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way?
I maybe on LinkedIn. It's Trent
Oh,
Wolbe, Wolbe is great. My email address is trent at climatehang.com, like
I
climate
love it.
change, but
I
climate
love it.
climate hang. And I'd love to talk to anybody who has questions about any of these spaces. It's always fun to catch up with people, especially in the LA area who want to do more.
Yeah, well, thank you again. It's a great story how Ninja Turtle got you here.
I
I
blame it
love
all
it.
on the turtles. And thank you, Izumi, for doing what you do. You're an amazing person and communicator. So I appreciate all you do.
Thank you so much. This was Izumi Tanaka with Home Green Homes podcast. Until my next episode.